More than 15 years ago, BMW created a new class of vehicles called the Coupe SUV with the X6. Now, the X6 was a sportier looking version of the X5. They then added the X4, which was based on the X3, and they also have this, the BMW X2, which debuted a few years ago. This is now the second generation of the X2, which arrives in the US for the 2024 model year. I'm here in Portugal to get a first drive of it, and in this video, we are going to answer two questions. One of which is, can an SUV actually be a coupe? And the second one is, can a front-wheel drive based BMW still be an ultimate driving machine? Let's find out. So let's start off with an exterior walk around of the X2 because they have dramatically changed the styling of this car from the previous generation. Now the front end is going to look very similar to the X1 on which it's based, although it is a little bit more sleek here at the front. I see a lot of the XM in this car's design. This car almost looks like a baby XM, which is really not bad considering that this car starts at about $42,000. The XM is up at about $100,000. We even have the same light up kidney grille. You can see the small illuminations here around this kidney grille. It actually looks really neat at night. So I do happen to really like the way that the front end of the X2 looks, a lot more than the old X2. I like these kind of angular headlights. You can see these little blue elements in here. Looks really nice when you get this frozen, I believe this is Portimao blue. Gorgeous looking color on this car. Now, the ones that we've actually been driving all day are actually this color over here. Check out that green. It's called Java green, I believe, and that's kind of like a matte color as well. So some really good colors on the X2. I love when BMW actually has a little bit of fun with the colors. Now, for the first time on an X2, you can actually get 21-inch wheels. These are part of an M Sport Plus package, I believe, with this nice Y-spoke here. You can get 19-inch wheels and 20-inch wheels as well. And when we get it out on the road, I'll tell you that although these wheels look really good, they do affect the ride, so it might not be something that I would opt for. Coming around to the side profile here, this X2 is over 7 inches longer than the previous generation. It's grown by about 7.6 inches. So that is a substantial growth. It's actually about 2 inches longer than the X1 as well. So that is one area where they've kind of changed the X2. It used to kind of be smaller than the X2. Now they've kind of made it a little bit more practical by making it longer. It's actually 2.5 inches taller than the outgoing X2 as well. But as you can see, the roof line does taper down here, sort of like a coupe, you know, in the same way that the X6 and the X4 do, giving you that kind of sportier character that you don't necessarily get on the X1. Now, the one we're looking at here is the M35. This is the more powerful, in fact, it's the most powerful version of the X2. Again, I kind of actually dig the way that this coupe SUV styling looks here at the back. I like this design on the X2 more than I actually like the X4 and the X6. I think those look a little bit weird. The only angle, I'm going to have you come around here, the only angle that I don't love on this car is this kind of 3/4 panel rear view here. There's kind of just a lot of sheet metal going here, but if we look at it directly from the back, I like this little spoiler here. I like how it kind of tapers down and you have this kind of duckbill spoiler. Kind of reminds me of a hot hatch, but when we get it out on the road, we'll see if it drives as good as it looks. Now that we've talked about the outside of the X2, let's step on inside where they've made a lot of improvements to this cabin. We basically have all of the latest technology that BMW has to offer. Well, not all of it, but all of the stuff that we really need. So because we're in the M35 version, we have these really nice suede sport seats. They have the fixed headrest here. You actually have the M logo here that is going to light up at night. We have a little M logo down here, and I'm really liking the blue stitching as well. The one thing I will say that we were driving this car for about 2 hours in the morning and then 2 hours in the afternoon. When I got out of it, I did kind of need a little bit of a stretch. We do have lumbar in here, but this is a really nice seat that hugs you in during sporty driving. But is it the most comfortable seat? I wouldn't go that far to say that. In terms of the technology, we've got the latest iDrive 9 infotainment system. So the rotating knob controller, that's gone. We don't have one of those anymore. We do have some basic controls down here. We've got our volume knob, which is quite nice that we do still have a physical volume knob. We have a forward and backward button. We do have some buttons here to change the drive modes. We have this button that's going to activate all of our safety systems. And we have this little tiny itty bitty gear knob to go ahead and put it into drive and reverse. But most of what you do is going to be on this screen. They have quick select functions to make it a little bit easier to use. I haven't had a ton of time to play with it, but it's going to suffer from some of the problems that I have with existing Beamer head units, which is to access things like the climate control, you need to use the touchscreen. To change the fan speed, that requires a separate menu. Now you can talk to it to make it a little bit easier, but I know not everybody likes to talk to their cars, and I wouldn't mind just a couple of buttons here underneath the screen to make things a little bit easier. Now we do have an M Sport package here, so we have a much chunkier steering wheel than you get on a base X2. You can see you have the little 12 o'clock marker here. We even have some really nice M stitching here around it, and we do have some big, nice paddle shifters that feel really nice when you're driving. We also have a digital gauge cluster, but something that I noticed about it is you can kind of see that it stops like right here, and there's a lot of black bezel here above it. That is something I don't notice on more expensive BMWs. So just remember that this is on the lower end of the BMW pricing structure, but when you opt for this M35i model, you still do get a pretty fairly premium cabin. Now, one of the things I noticed as I step into the back seat of the X2 is that I didn't bang my head on the roof getting in. That was a big problem with the old BMW X2, but this roof is a lot higher because we have about an inch added to the wheelbase and about 7.6 inches added overall compared to the old X2. I have plenty of leg room back here. I used to feel really crammed in the back of the X2, and I definitely don't anymore. I've got some nice air vents. I've got some nice USB-C ports. And the thing that I really like is that they have this nice carve out here on the back of the seat, giving me plenty of legroom here in the back. So this might be one of the smallest SUVs that BMW makes, but it is still very comfortable for passengers here in the back. Now, in terms of cargo capacity, BMW has made some improvements here. We just click the little BMW roundel. That's going to go ahead and open up our power boot here in the back. We've got about 25 cubic feet of space back here, which is about 5 cubes more than you used to get on the old X2. I believe that the total cubic feet hasn't gone up that much. It's about 51 cubic feet when you drop those rear seats down. So it's not a huge improvement over the old X2. But the nice thing about this current X2 is that it's really not that far off in terms of storage space compared to the X1. In the last generation, the X1 was significantly bigger. Here, they have now made the trunk big enough, so you're really not losing a ton when you spend a little bit more to get the X2. All right, so now that we've wrapped up our walk around, I want to conclude by saying that we've asked and answered the first part of my question at the beginning of this video, which is, can a coupe be an SUV, or can an SUV be a coupe? And I think that this new and improved X2 really does both of those things well. As a coupe, it looks better than before. I think it's much better looking than the original X2, and I think it's even better looking than the X4 and the X6 within BMW's own lineup. And then as an SUV, they made it bigger, they made the back seat more roomy, they made the trunk more practical. It's in fact not even that much smaller than the X1, and they kept the price, even, we'll talk about that later, not much more than the BMW X1 costs. So in terms of this being a coupe SUV, it succeeds. But now it's time to answer another question. Can a front-wheel drive based vehicle be a true ultimate driving machine? So in the past, when I drove the X2 and other front-wheel drive based BMWs like the 2 Series Grand Coupe, I always thought that they were a little bit lackluster. They didn't even drive as nice as the Mini Coopers, which also share a platform. This X2 actually shares a platform not only with the X1, but also the Mini Countryman, and they just weren't as fun to drive as the rear-wheel drive based BMWs. Now, this is a front-wheel drive platform, but no version of the X2, at least not in the US, is going to be sold with front-wheel drive. You can get the xDrive 28i model. That's going to be the base model, a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, producing 241 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. The one we're driving is the M35i, which also has xDrive. This one has the same 295 pound-feet of torque, but the power goes up from 241 to 312 horsepower. That is substantial. So while 0 to 60 in the xDrive 28 takes 6.2 seconds, this one is only going to take 5.2 seconds, so it's about a full second quicker to 60. And honestly, I think we should test that out. Let me go into the My Modes, put it into the Sport mode, put the transmission into Sport. Let's come to a stop, foot on the brake, foot on the gas, ready? Ooh, really slow off the line. That definitely was not launch control, but once it's spooled up, it's a pretty quick car. Definitely did not get launch control to work properly there, but now, woohoo! Yeah, it's a pretty quick car. 0 to 60 in 5.2, no slouch there. We've got a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. So the old X2 and all of the cars on that platform had an 8-speed automatic. This is now a 7-speed dual clutch, meaning that you put your foot down, boom, that gear shift happens real quick, especially when you're in sport mode. I will say that when you're in like personal comfort mode, you're just driving around, you have the transmission in D, it is a little bit slower to downshift and give you the right gear. But when you're in sport mode, when you're kind of in the right power band, so right now I'm in 4th gear, 3rd gear, boom, instant, quick like that. I really do like how it feels in the sport version of the automatic mode. You can take manual control. We've got some really good paddle shifters. These are a really nice size. They have like a nice rubberized texture here on the back. They are plastic in portions, but the rubber feel is actually quite nice. I will say it could be a little bit quicker to respond on the paddles. Sometimes you pull the paddle and then it'll give you the gear change. The actual gear change itself is happening quite quickly, but not as quickly as I can hit the paddle. I feel like this transmission is better when it's left in its automatic setting. And something really funny caught my eye while I was reading the press release for this car, and that is that there is a new front axle in this car that they say is unaffected by torque steer. So torque steer is when you have the power going out to the front axle. When an axle has to do the steering and the power, sometimes as the power comes in, it'll cause the steering to kind of move around a little bit, and that is what is torque steer. So right now when I put my foot down, let's go ahead and make sure I'm in the right gear. Foot down. Yeah, the wheel does move around a little bit when you put the power down. So there definitely is some torque steer. I would say that the axle is not so good that it completely eliminates torque steer altogether, but I like a little bit of torque steer. I like the car to communicate to me that the power is not quite going down in the right capacity just yet, and then once it gets all of its grip, then it does. And I will say that that is a big area where this X2 is so improved from the outgoing model. The outgoing model, the steering just felt super dead. It wasn't sporty. It wasn't hot hatch-like. Now this, I get little feedback from the wheel. I still have that nice sharpness that I got from the old X2. And when I get an empty bit of road like this with turns, I can really rip it. I can enjoy. I can feel like I have confidence in what the car is doing through the steering wheel. This X2 is much nicer to drive, much nicer in terms of steering than the old model for sure. Now in terms of transmission, we also have a boost function, which is quite interesting. So BMW puts this on a lot of their electric cars as well. Basically, you pull the left paddle and it's going to give you max power for a short boost of time. So in the gas-powered models, it's going to go to the lowest possible gear. It's going to overdrive the turbo. Woo-hoo! You can see you get the little boost gauge. It definitely feels a little bit quicker while you have the boost paddle pulled. It's a really nice kind of like push to pass function. If you're not wanting to change it into sport mode and all that stuff, you've got a slow car in front of you, you want to pass them, pull the paddle, goes into boost. And you definitely get some nice acceleration from that. Now, as I've been driving this car around, you've probably noticed there's a nice growly sound from this 4-cylinder engine. There's even a few cracks and pops on the overrun like you'd expect from a hot hatch. Now that's great until you learn that they're all fake. Now, just like BMW's electric cars, this has iconic sound. So that is sound enhancement through the speakers. And when I go ahead and turn iconic sounds off, and I do that same little burst of acceleration, now it just sounds not as full. It sounds more removed. So off, on, off, on. Oh, you really hear a difference. And the thing that I think I'm most weirded out by is the fact that we do have those nice cracks and pops on the overrun. So when it shifts gears, you get a nice bum-bum-bum, bum-bum. That's not the exhaust doing that. It's a speaker going ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum to make it sound like the exhaust is actually cracking. Now, the M35 version does have an M-specific exhaust. Ba-bum, ba-bum. But that's not on the outside. That's only here on the inside. I don't know what it sounds like on the outside because I've been behind the wheel driving, but I can't imagine that it's that loud if you can't even hear it from inside the car, and they need to amplify that with the iconic sound. So if you're the type of person that's put off by fake engine sounds in your car, you're really not going to like this. But then when you go ahead and turn it off, like, it just doesn't sound quite as good. So I'm not really sure which one I prefer. Honestly, even though at my core it shakes me that they're not real sounds, I do think I like how it sounds better with the iconic sounds. So I want to wrap up by saying that I think they've really improved how the X2, especially in this M35i version, feels to drive. It finally feels like a slightly taller hot hatch, like that GTI, that Golf R that I've really wanted this crossover to feel like when you get to the limit. Now, the one thing that I don't love about this whole equation is that we have an M adaptive suspension here on this M35i model. Theoretically, it should get firmer and softer, depending on the road conditions, but we've got these big 21-inch wheels on here, and when the road gets bumpy, this car really lets you know. So I've just pulled off the sort of coast road outside of the hotel area into the hotel grounds, and these roads are beat up. There are huge bumps, there are cobblestones. It is super uncomfortable. So I am about to be taken for a ride in this X2. Here we go over the cobblestones. Oh, you can tell the camera, it's struggling to keep me in focus. Yeah, the ride is definitely a little jittery here on the X2 with these big wheels. I would suggest you should probably just get the 19s. It'll be a little bit better. So that was the 2024 BMW X2. Pricing for the xDrive 28i version, the less powerful model, starts at just over $42,000. If you want this M35 model, that's going to start at just over $51,000, but there are plenty of options that you need to add on to get it exactly how you've seen it in this video. Now, the X2 costs about $1,500 more than the BMW X1, and I'm going to go ahead and say, if you like how this looks compared to the X1, $1,500 is really not that much to spend, considering that the premium between an X3 and an X4 and then an X5 to an X6 is much larger than $1,500. So I do like that BMW was able to keep the X2 reasonably priced even compared to the X1. Now, how does it stack up against the competition? The only real direct competitor that this has in the United States is going to be the Mercedes-Benz GLA. Now, that competes with the GLA 250 against the xDrive 28, and then they have this GLA 35, which competes against this M35. Pretty similarly powered, although I do think the BMW feels way more premium inside, and I think it actually has a better ride. The one advantage that Mercedes has is that they have a GLA 45 model that is way faster than anything the X2 has to offer, because BMW has never built an M version of the X2, but I do still think that this is a very strong competitor to the Mercedes, and you should easily cross-shop them. I really hope you've enjoyed this look at the 2024 BMW X2. For more videos like it, be sure to like, subscribe, ring that notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos, and if you want to read more about the X2, be sure to check out my written review over at carbuzz.com. I'll see you next time.